Hey, everybody. Danny Charity here. Again, with another family office session. And as you all know, today I have a very special guest with us, Mr. Pierce, that spoke at our blockchain online conference as well. And I will read a little bit of your bio while people are getting on the call. Brock, how are you? Good morning. Where
Good
are you?
morning. I'm grateful. I was in Puerto Rico this morning, and I'm now in Miami Beach. We
Oh,
just got into the room about 10 minutes ago, and so it was a little bit of a fire drill to have ironed clothes and compute and cameras and lighting up. But we're right here, right on time.
yep. Thank you. I appreciate that. Actually, next month at our online family office blockchain thing we're doing, my keynote speaker is the mayor, Suarez, that I think is amazing. He's not only taking with warm, hugs all the people that are going out of New York and LA and are moving there anyway because of taxes, because of everything. But he was also mentioning that now citizens can pay taxes in Bitcoin, which shows how innovative he is and open-minded.
Yeah, there's no question that he has sent out a very big signal to the country saying that Miami is a place of innovation and entrepreneurship is welcome here. They're thinking about the future, making sure that they're part of it, and certainly capitalizing on the rising rates and taxes at a federal level. People are thinking more about the net earnings, and Florida is clearly benefiting greatly from it. I've had the pleasure of spending some time with Mayor Suarez. And the fact that he's done this has not just been great for Miami, it's been very elevating for him personally. They're talking about him potentially being a vice presidential candidate in the next election. And so it does do big things when you put yourself out there. After DeSantis, he's probably the second most notable elected official in the state right now, and it's a big state.
And is the thing is, Miami always tried in the area to bring the entrepreneurs. Forgot the name of a very big investor that is doing an event there for years. Anyway, they never really they got some, but not really. It still wasn't a tech hub. But now, when I spoke to Michael Blumberg a month ago from Blumberg Capital, which is a major VC, and he moved from LA to Miami. So now I'm starting to actually see serious guys getting.
Mike, not Michael Bloomberg,
Not
but David.
Bloomberg, Michael
David.
Blumberg.
I think David Blumberg.
David Blumberg. Sorry,
Yeah,
David.
David's a friend of mine. We've been around the world, and he was also a relatively early investor into this fintech and blockchain ecosystem. I'm a big fan of his, and when people like that, pillars of the Silicon Valley ecosystem are living here, it's capital formation, right? You can have the innovators and the entrepreneurs, but if the sophisticated capital is not there to support them to get through the seed and to get to the A and to get to the B, it's hard to develop. And Florida has it all now. I mean, it might be the next Silicon Valley.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start by reading really just a little bit of your exciting journey. I call this session the remarkable story of your life, which is really amazing. And I always said, when you hit it very big and were very successful, some were saying, oh, it wasn't the right time. People were raising capital. And the more people were throwing money at blockchain, and the more, I spoke to other people and looked at your bio, that's not true. You actually invented yourself time and time again in different sectors, which is I think amazing. And I would want to read just a little bit about your career. It's really not going to be half of the story, but born into a middle class home in Minneapolis, Minnesota, to a mother who was a minister and a father who was a carpenter. He began his working career as a child actor. We'll talk about it soon, starring in movies such as The Mighty Ducks and First Kid. Working at an extremely young age, he witnessed the impact media and technology have on the world, and its importance in bridging connections across borders. Since then, he co-founded, advised, and funded over 100 companies to support the creation of new jobs and marketplaces through technological innovation. He's an entrepreneur, philanthropist, and a father. He has an extensive track record of funding, advising, and investing in innovative businesses and foundations, and is recognized as a global thought leader. Based upon his many successes and ability to connect unique groups of talented individuals to solve complex problems, he was nominated to accept the role as the independent candidate for president of the United States in the 2020 election. Later on, he created the first, he created the first major marketplace for virtual goods in online gaming, which is expected to grow to $190 billion by 2025. As a co-founder of Blockchain Capital, he co-developed security token offering, STOs. As a pioneer in blockchain and digital currency, he helped create the first initial coin offering, ICOs as we all know them, as a new way to launch digital currencies. Shortly after creating EOS stablecoin and Tether, the latter becoming the world's most traded cryptocurrency. Annual trading volume exceeds $10 trillion, in which Pierce was responsible for putting the US dollar on the blockchain with Tether in 2014. So that's just a little bit of what you've done. I mean, I read the articles about you and the great work you do in Puerto Rico, helping those who need it very quickly. I remember in the article, somebody was just knocking on your door saying they needed help, and you were like, okay, send somebody over, let's do something about it, which is so, amazing, and most would take ages to move, and you react. And I think that's why you moved to Puerto Rico. But so much to talk about. I mean, maybe what I wanted to begin is basically your childhood. And I remember, first of all, how was it to be a child actor? I mean, I know you learned a lot by how you managed to get your first role and get attention when you had a great competition. And you said yourself, I don't know if I was the best actor, but I managed to get the attention so people remembered me. And that served you throughout life. So if you can share that with us, that would be great.
Yeah, so I started acting at the age of 3, so I didn't consciously choose to do this. My mother got a job as a casting director when I was very young. And so that opened up the door for me to be able to audition for commercials and print advertisements at the time. And eventually at the age of 10, having been a kid from Minnesota playing hockey, I was able to book a role in Mighty Ducks. I think I was the only kid that knew how to play hockey with acting experience. And so if I didn't book a role, it would have been time to throw in the towel. And that eventually led to me moving out to California. And so here's a couple of things that you learn as an actor. You learn how to interview, right? You're going on auditions. Most of us, only when we're looking at changing our jobs, do we go through that process of interviewing. As an actor, certainly if you're out there actively, you might be doing that multiple times a day for years of your life. And so you learn how to interview. And so that's, and another thing that you learn is you learn how to take rejection very well, because you usually don't get the role. There's many, many people trying to get that one job. And that's just the nature of that business. So one of the things I learned how to do was to make myself memorable. I mean, think if you're a casting director, a director, a producer, sitting in these auditions, you're watching someone come in and read the same lines over and over and over again. And so it becomes kind of monotonous. And so the goal for me was to make myself stand out. And because I was dealing with young people, they were less refined or developed in this area. And so you come in and you say, hi, my name is, and you read your lines and you leave. I also was I guess technically a professional magician, meaning I was paid to do it, but I was a hobbyist and I did magic tricks. And so the first thing I would do is I'd come in and say hello, and then I would do a magic trick, and that would begin a conversation. How as a 13-year-old kid do you engage adults? And I did it with magic. And then I would do another trick, and next thing you know, you're having a conversation, and 10 or 15 minutes into the meeting, normally you're only in the room for 3 to 5 minutes. They're like, wait, we have people waiting. Let's do your lines, because they became so enamored with the conversation and the break from, the same thing over and over again. Then I read my lines and then they're like, oh, that was great. And you're talking, and I'm in the room for 20 to 25 minutes. And at the end of the day, it's hard to remember who did what. And I may not have been the best actor, but I was good enough. I was the person they really remembered at the end of the day. They remembered a positive experience. They were happy. They were engaged. They were doing something different. They were entertained. And that ultimately led to me getting the callbacks and eventually booking the roles. And so that was the trick.
It's amazing. And then that's something that helped you throughout life, right? How to present yourself, how to get attention, the right attention. And how was it to be a child actor? I mean, it sounds to me like it's every kid's dream. How was it for you to be in the glamour and everything? And I know you knowingly, you decided you don't want to do it anymore at some point.
Yeah, so the good and the bad of it. I mentioned some of the good, learning how to interview, dealing with rejection, learning how to present, really positive. And then, but one of the negatives is I didn't have a normal childhood. I didn't, eventually my acting jobs became so active that I was working full time. And so I didn't get to go to school like normal kids. I didn't have that experience. Well, at the same time, the positive aspect of that is I was never indoctrinated, into the education system. And as a result of that, some of the limitations that come from it, I never experienced, which is part of the reason why I'm not confined by reality as it exists, right? I was never introduced to the box. I was never put in the box. And so I don't even see it. And so, as a result of that, I didn't have the same limitations that are essentially imposed or put upon us in our youth. But, at the other time, I didn't have that normal childhood experience, and I had something very different. I mean, I would be on sets for sometimes, months at a time with no other young people. And I had to basically develop a relationship with, the directors, the producers, the actors, the crew. And that was my life. And so it forced me to grow up fast, which has served me very well in life. I really appreciate, I'm grateful for the opportunity to have had that, very unique experience as a young person. And it has served me very well. But at about the age of, 15, once you're starring in, some of the biggest motion pictures, you start to experience fame. And as a young, person, that was awkward, everyone wanting your attention, everyone wanting to take your picture, everyone wanting your autograph. And it made me start to ask myself sort of the existential question of, why am I here? What is my purpose? Is this what I want to be doing? And I came to the realization that I really wanted to be the producer. I wanted to be the entrepreneur. I wanted to be the person creating the things, not performing in those things. And at the age of 16, I decided to quit acting. And I recognized that technology was going to change the world, having been a byproduct of the first generation of kids with computers and internet connections. I'm like, this technology thing is going to change the world. I want to be a part of that. And so I chose to quit acting at the height of my career to go try and build businesses, which at the time, everybody thought I was crazy. Everyone's like, people would do anything to be in your situation. You're going to be making, potentially millions of dollars a movie. Why would you want to quit this? And that this doesn't make any sense. And then when I said what I wanted to do, they looked at me even more crazily. They're like, what makes you think that you could start a company? What makes you think that people would fund you? What college did you graduate from? What credentials do you have that makes you think you could do such a thing? And I said, I don't know, but I'm gonna go try. And that's one of the things, an important lesson I think for all of us is we eventually get comfortable doing whatever it is that we're doing because it becomes safe. We know what we're doing. We've secured our position in whatever that world that we're operating in. And there's normally economic sort of golden handcuffs that keep you tethered to whatever that thing is. At a young age, I also learned to just walk away from whatever it is that I had and I was doing, to take risk and to venture into the unknown, and to have the confidence that I might actually be able to go do something else. I might be able to reinvent myself. And to learn that lesson at a young age is a really powerful thing. I'm very comfortable walking away from anything I'm doing. Obviously, having been, a good fiduciary and making sure that I've fulfilled my obligations and my commitments. But to say, oh, I see something else that I think is important and I want to go learn about that, and to go fully dedicate myself to whatever that new thing is. And so, yeah, it's again, I feel so blessed. I'm so grateful for the opportunities that I've had, and the fact that many of these things have worked out. Not all of them have. Most of the stories you hear, with all the things that I've done, are just the ones that worked. There's plenty of failures there. They say, successes have many parents and failures are all orphans. And so those ones don't make it into the resume, but I've had my fair share of failing and all the lessons that come from it. I mean, we typically learn more from our failures than we do our successes. And so I've been repeatedly humbled throughout the process as well.
Thank you. So before we go, throughout your career, because I really want to see how you grew to where you are today. So many child actors end up in ruins, right? I mean, in drugs, in horrible places. I mean, so many child actors don't, succeed. Why is that? And you managed to avoid it, obviously, because you just decided to get out of this world. But why do you think that happens?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, you're putting a young person into a place of being famous during their developmental years. And so when you become a famous actor, you're invited to everything. Everyone wants your attention. Everyone's singing your praises. Everyone wants your autograph, your picture. And you start to get this, you're elevated. You're kind of, your feet are off the ground. And eventually, because you're a young actor that, then maybe goes through a lot of physical change, the transition from child to adult, as actors is really something only a handful of young people have ever succeeded in doing. And so you go from being on top of the world to eventually being brought back to ground, and the coping of dealing with that, being, the center of attention to not being the center of attention, creates a lot of emotional challenges for young people. And then they find coping mechanisms. And those coping mechanisms might be drugs, they might be other things, typically harmful coping mechanisms to deal with that very challenging transition. And again, during your developmental years. And a lot of people spin out because all of a sudden, they didn't know how to manage money. Their money was squandered. And next thing they know, they're having to be a waiter in a restaurant. Not that there's anything wrong with being in the service industry, but for someone that just went from having everything to having nothing is hard for anyone to deal with, but especially difficult for a young person. And that's principally, what I think is the cause of this. And it's not just for young people. It happens with athletes as well. It can happen to all sorts of people. From going from having, from being a haver to a have not is always challenging. But as an adult, we're better equipped to deal with these things. We have more life experience. We've had to overcome, some degree of challenge in our life. But as a young person, that's typically not true. And that's why it turns out the way it does. And in my instance, I kind of quit at the height of my career to go pursue something else. And then that started to work. So I never really experienced, call it that true fall from grace. And as a result of that, but it was challenging for me as well. You're off venturing into doing something new. And then my first business failed. I remember I was 16 years old when I jumped into the dot-com sort of boom, Internet 1.0. I'm probably the youngest, person from that generation that, raised nearly $100 million, built, a sizable business. And so I'm the youngest of the old guys, right? The youngest of the first generation of tech entrepreneurs. And again, as I said, you learn more from your failures. So I actually lived through a market cycle, right? The rise and the bust. We raised $88 million from NBC and Intel and Microsoft and Lazard Frere and Chase and, the David Geffens, the Terry Semels. And on paper, I was worth a lot of money in 1999 when we filed our S1 to go public. I thought I was on top of the world. And then, 6 months later, the entire, kind of world came crashing down and 99 out of 100 businesses failed. And all that wealth I thought I accumulated on paper, went up in smoke. And then we went into this very, very dark period where they thought the internet was over, that it was just a passing fad. Even though the fundamentals of adoption kept going, people had been so burned in that first sort of internet 1.0 boom that no one wanted to touch it. No one wanted to invest in it. Literally, there were no meetings being had. Most firms said you don't meet with anyone around an internet company, and if you do, you're fired. Literally, there was no willingness to basically fund internet businesses, and I didn't have a lot of money. And so I typically would need investment like most entrepreneurs that didn't come from a wealthy family or have the funds themselves to invest from past success or whatever means that got them there. And so that was a pretty wild time. I mean, just to give a fact for those that weren't around for it, PayPal was the fastest growing internet company anyone had ever seen at the time. And they couldn't get a single investor to fund them. This is how Elon Musk got into the business. Elon had started a company called X.com, which was doing something similar to PayPal. And then PayPal existed. PayPal was doing extraordinarily well. X.com was not, but it had a lot of money left. And so they merged those two businesses because it was the only way to get cash to continue to fund PayPal's business. The hottest company in technology at the time couldn't find a single investor other than their main investor that was already in the deal. But that investor where I did some work, it was a firm called Clearstone. It was Idea Lab Capital merged. And because their fund documents didn't allow them to lead an investment where they were the prior lead without raising 50. So the lead investor that knew the company intimately, one of the most reputable firms in the world, major success, was willing to put up half the cash, but their fund documents prohibited them from funding anything more than that. They couldn't find a single investor in the world to co-invest with them. And so they had to merge with X.com to get the $15 million that was left on that balance sheet. So it was a very difficult time for anyone trying to build a technology business. And so I struggled like anyone during that period to build. And I was fortunate enough that the next business I started, I was able to bootstrap it and grind it through to profitability, and just barely. We couldn't make payroll, and like I'm trying to convince everyone not to quit, and our revenues are rising. I'm like, we're almost profitable. Here's some more equity, here's some bonuses. It's coming. And to keep a business alive when no one in the world would fund anything, even if you had proven product market fit, even if your revenues were skyrocketing, no one would fund internet businesses at the time.
So before we go to your next step, which was a very successful company, so you were not introduced to that box of school and all of that and all the limitations it brings with it. And how was it? I think the other box usually is our parents. How was it? Did your parents tell you the sky's the limit? You can go and just follow your heart. What part did they contribute or not to your development? And do you have any siblings as well? I would love to understand if they also were following paths like you have, which are very adventurous.
Yeah, so I have one sibling, one younger brother, 4.5 years younger than I am. For him, it was very difficult because he had to grow up in my shadow. When everybody calls you Brock's brother, that's a very difficult thing, again, during your developmental years. And so I didn't really have anyone that said, hey, the sky's the limit. I just figured that out on my own through my own life experience. I just kind of figured it out through my own successes and taking of risk. I didn't really have anything. I mean, there were people, as I like to say, everyone is my mentor. When we talk about mentors, we can learn something from everyone we meet, from the homeless person on the street. Everybody has something to offer. Everybody has a life experience with a lesson and a story, there if you're willing to seek it. And so most of it was generally just through life experience. My parents, I think, were just kind of like a little confused. They're like, who is this kid? What did we give birth to? He's going to quit acting to go do what? This doesn't make any sense. Why would someone quit? And, I was, a determined kind of like, just risk taker, out there, willing to blaze a trail and to pave a path where, I didn't know anyone had ever been before.
And they didn't try to convince you to change your mind? Are you crazy? Acting is going so well. We worked so hard. You're going to throw it all away now?
They were pretty supportive, though I think confused. I think they were just like, hey, you made it this far. I guess, who are we to tell you you can't do that? I mean, they were supportive, but I think generally confused and just like, and then, once you do it again, they're just like, okay, well, I guess best just to let him kind of figure it out on his own. And then, eventually, you've done it enough times and people just start to go, okay, well, you've built up enough credibility through your own merit, through your own efforts and actions and successes that, we're just going to kind of trust that you know what you're doing, and recognize that you'll make mistakes and that life is an endless process of learning, trial and error. And so, I love my parents. I've got a very good relationship with both of them. My mother lives in Puerto Rico and is, assisting in raising my our 2-year-old daughter. My father is in the process of moving down. My little brother's been living there. So I'm very close with my family and, grateful. And as a father, it's all about the next generation, obviously your own kids, but, all of them, right? That's why we're here. We're here to be good stewards during, call it our term and hopefully leave the world better than we found it, and make sure that there's a world that they can grow up in and that they can thrive in. And, clearly right now we live in times where it's very concerning what kind of world we're going to leave for the next generation. How much are we borrowing from the future to pay for today? And what are we going to be handing over to them when it's their time to lead? A world in ruin, or a solid foundation on which to continue to build, all the things that are needed.
And then we'll get soon to that point because you do so much in philanthropy and helping foundations. And I think one of the main reasons you moved to Puerto Rico. But before that, if we go back to your career, so you built. So after the dark days of the internet, you finally you had a really highly successful company in the gaming world, which basically, for someone like me who doesn't understand that space, people are getting all these prizes. I see my kids playing all the time like crazy, the Fortnite and all of that. You get all those prizes and you actually trade that later on, which for somebody from the outside, it would be like, what? You play a game, you earn whatever they give you in that game, and that is a commodity that's traded and people make money and all of that. So I'm not sure if I explained it correctly. I'm from the outside in, but if you could explain how did that develop so well? And I remember you had people playing the games all around the world, and that's really the major success that you had in technology, the first one.
Yeah. So in addition to being an actor, I was a gamer. I played a lot of video games and I also collected baseball cards and I played Magic the Gathering, these collectible card games. And so when the first networked video games came out, what we called persistent worlds or massively multiplayer games or virtual worlds, you may have heard of World of Warcraft and EverQuest and Second Life and Fortnite. So in these worlds, because they're persistent and multiplayer, meaning when you log off and you come back in, your character is still there with all of its property, its virtual property or possessions, a market naturally emerged. And one of the insights I had early on is just because something is intangible doesn't make it less valuable. At the end of the day, it still has utility in, whatever your pastime is, your extracurricular activities, and may even improve your social status in a virtual world. And so having recognized that, I went and fully, immersed myself in the virtual world. I lived in it. Quite frankly, my body was just, something that was sustained so that I could actually live in a virtual environment. And that's what I spent my 20s basically doing. And then in these emerging worlds, these virtual countries, I became the main market maker. And so built up a supply chain of about 400,000 people, principally in China, that would play these games professionally to collect the digital currencies that I'd sell all over the world. We were PayPal's largest customer for years, Google's largest advertiser for a moment. We launched Alipay. We rolled up 40 different, call it fan sites and sites with information. It became a top 100 web property in the world in terms of traffic. built a television channel in China. And so we did $10+ billion worth of selling these things. And I learned about cross-border payments, and I rolled up the South Korean market, and I lived all over the world, basically managing these game economies and the secondary markets that were in them and the exchanges. And, then we would invite professors in to study what, could be done with virtual economies. As an economist, there's a lot of theories out there that we can never really test because the cost of a mistake is too great. But in a virtual country, you can do that. The worst thing that happens is you shut down a server that might have 10 or 50,000 people on it. Obviously, they won't be happy, but you're not ruining the world. And so, you got to learn how the monetary system works and how money moves and how payment systems work and cross-border and currency control laws and economics and trade. And so it was a very, interesting period in my life. My main investor was Goldman Sachs. Principal Strategies, which was the black box of Goldman, the proprietary trading desk that was responsible for 40% of their earnings prior to the 2008 financial crisis. We were their first private investment they ever made because they took a look at what we were doing and they're like, this is crazy. You're in some ways managing a system that's more complex than the global financial system. Like, who are you? What are you doing? We got to be a part of this thing. And so after a decade of doing that, we wanted to see if these same concepts could be applied in the analog default or, in the real world. And that's what eventually led me to cryptocurrency.
By the way, just to understand how it works. So if I'm playing Fortnite, instead of buying it, whatever I want, the utility from Fortnite, I buy it from your market that you've created there. Why would it be cheaper for me to do that way? Or back in the day, these guys, you had to play to win this? Because I know today you can just buy everything. You can go to Fortnite and just pay money and get the stuff without trying hard.
Yeah, so the video game industry used to be a packaged software business. Then it became a subscription as a service business where you can download the game basically for free, and then you pay a subscription fee. Back then, no game companies sold currency or game items. We pioneered the entire market for that, which was a little controversial in the beginning. The game companies were like, what is going on here? Brock's making more money off our game than we are. And obviously that created a number of complications. I was not loved by every video game executive, but emergent behavior, when things are done with something that you create beyond what you intended, that's ultimately a beautiful thing. And it was through the work that we did, we showed the video game industry that you can have this pay to, free to play, buy virtual items model. I mean, literally our business changed the entire business model of the entire video game industry. We pioneered that. And that's the model the whole world uses today. I don't like what's happened to that as a gamer, because now the games have been designed that the only way to win is you have to pay to win. And they've made it so that as a normal player that doesn't have a big budget, you basically can't compete. And so I don't like how the gaming industry has really evolved. And I think the next evolution and where we're going right now is it's play to earn, where they're finding a balance where you can't overcharge and you want to allow the players of your games to be able to earn and make money and participate in secondary markets. And that's what we're seeing in places like South Korea, it's like the mecca of the game industry, much more developed. We're starting to see that in China, not as much in the Western world, but we're starting to see the beginning of that, where gamers won't play your game if they don't get to keep their property, if there's not an opportunity to make money. Why play a game where you can't make any money when you can play a game where you can make money? And so the model is shifting yet again to one that I think is more in balance, one where the game companies can win, but the players can win too. Let's call it the citizens or the residents of these worlds.
Amazing. And then you're mostly known for EOS, for ICOs, for your world, for what you've been doing in the blockchain world. So if you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so got into the cryptocurrency space and a little apprehensive for a while. I was concerned that this industry is so disruptive that I was probably the highest profile figure to be in that business early on. And this is so disruptive to the world. I was concerned that it might cost me my life or my liberty. And so I I was what you'd call a ninja operating in the shadows in the early days, because I was very concerned about my well-being. And then you eventually ask yourself the question again, which is, why am I here? You know, this is my purpose. My whole life has basically led to this point. And so am I going to live in fear, or am I going to, take that risk, which could be very costly? And am I going to be mindful and thoughtful and careful enough to understand the law, to understand the regulations, and not to make any mistakes? Because the consequences, could be very severe. And so I got into the business and, did a bunch of things, became probably the biggest, cryptocurrency miner for a little while. And then in 2013, I was just like, okay, I'm going to start speaking at the conferences, and I'm going to start to publicly build and start building out the bridges, the roads, and the tunnels, the infrastructure necessary to make this ecosystem thrive. And so started a lot of things. Mastercoin, as you mentioned, is where we did the first ICO, or invented the ICO, which is changing capital formation. Started blockchain capital, the first venture fund created the space. It's on its fifth fund, one of the most successful venture funds of all time. The way things are going, it might be the #1 fund ever. Certainly one of them. Started the first crypto bank because I needed to find a way to bank our industries, because they're companies, because the banks didn't want to bank us. Started Tether, where we digitized the US dollar, created the first security token, recognizing that this technology is more efficient and more secure, and ultimately all financial transactions should be settled, stocks, bonds, et cetera, with these systems. Governments and monetary systems, central banks should be running on these systems. Did a lot of different stuff. We did EOS, we did Casper more recently, and I've helped out many others along the way, and so been one of the more active evangelists out there, talking and providing people with knowledge and information, supporting the young entrepreneurs with my time or capital, and then starting a fair number of projects myself as an entrepreneur, which is what I really enjoy doing.
And now, if we're talking a little bit about the cryptocurrency world and what's going on, I mean, first of all, I feel the market kind of changed. I mean, I remember in 2018 when I was going to check the market out, of 2017 or somewhere around there, when some families told me, hey, you're missing on this blockchain thing, you should check it out. And I was, we come from the old school family office world. It's very suspicious, and we had a lot of reasons to be suspicious. And I went to all these conferences and I said to myself, you know what, I 95% of the people here are, I don't want to meet them, because I saw advisors that were basically, pardon my French, screwing the ICOs that thought that these guys know what they're doing. They had no idea what they're doing. The guy was before working at, I don't know, an advertising agency, suddenly he's an advisor. And then you saw ICOs that were, you saw just, I cannot, even talk about that. When I think about some of the white papers I've seen of folks that, didn't have any.
It looks a lot like the internet in 1996,
exactly.
1997, 1998. Anytime you have an asymmetry of information that's this great, and where a lot of wealth is being created, it attracts a lot of bad actors, but it also creates opportunity for a lot of people that aren't qualified. And so there were a lot of junk deals, but that's always been the case when there's some emerging industry. So this isn't a new thing. And you have to look at the pattern recognition of the past to say, oh, this is part of the normal cycle. Yeah, when the dot-com bubble burst, 99% of projects failed, but Amazon came out of that, the internet came out of that, eBay came out of that, a lot of things that are very real and here with us today. And so you have to say, oh yeah, 95% of this is not something I'd want to interact with, but you got to find the diamond in the rough, right? You got to find that needle in the haystack. And just because you're seeing a lot of that, what you see early on in an industry's development, you have to really look deeper and have an opinion about the merit of what's actually occurring here. And what we saw in 2012 and 13 and 14 was academia basically got behind this and said, no, this technology is actually very real from a cryptography and a security perspective. Then you saw venture capital, 2013, 14, 15, the Mark Andreessens and Tim Drapers and everyone start to get in. Then you saw big tech, the Facebooks and those groups started to try and get in. Then you started seeing the major financial institutions, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, BNY Mellon, Visa, MasterCard, Amex, PayPal, et cetera, And now we're seeing 70 plus governments starting to get in. And so, we're kind of at the final piece, which is this industry has been validated. And yes, there's a lot of garbage, but through each of these cycles, through each of these market corrections, the riffraff, are weeded out, and you start to see which people operate with integrity, which people, do what they say and speak truth, and keep doing the work even during the really hard times. As I like to say, bear markets bear fruit. Bull markets, excuse my language, produce bull, shit. And then you start to see who are the real ones, right? You get the get rich quick, they're the people there when, things are good and they're loading their pockets up. And as soon as it gets difficult, they're gone. Like cockroaches when the lights go on. And so it's, that's part of the process, but the industry's matured. The people participating are much more knowledgeable. They don't just run into a white paper. They want to really know who, what, how, what is the value proposition, what's the need, what is, the market's definitely maturing, and it's definitely one where I encourage everyone to participate. If you haven't bought $20, $50, $100 in Bitcoin, go do it. I don't encourage anyone to invest in anything. I only encourage you to invest in yourselves so that you can make informed decisions for yourself. Because when you're thinking for yourself, it's very hard for anyone to take advantage of you. It's very hard for anyone to scam or rip you off if you're really doing the work. The blind leading the blind. Don't just follow people saying, oh, this is what to do. Trust me, trust yourself. And the best way to do that is go buy $100. Go really just start to understand what's going on here. And, crawl before you walk, right? Walk before you run. And so I think a big, thing that puts this into perspective too is about $3 trillion of wealth has been created over the last 5 years. This market has created more wealth in a short period of time than anything ever in the existence of the world. And we've never seen anything like this. And it's been distributed all over the world. So, this dwarfs Microsoft, Apple, Google, Facebook. It's a very big deal. This is facilitating the largest wealth transfer in the history of the world. We're not far away from a majority of the world's billionaires. A majority of the world's billionaires having made their money from cryptocurrency. Just think about that for a moment. It's a very big deal. And when you think about wealth, many people have, it's been over the course of families, right? It's generational wealth, or it's people that worked really hard for a very long time to get what they have. And what comes with that is a sense of entitlement. It's mine. When people make their money quickly and with a lot less effort, they're also much more willing to invest it in things they believe in, give it to charities. And when you look around the world right now and you start thinking about the challenges that we face, I think it's the greatest thing that could ever happen is we're putting money into the hands of people that are willing to part with it to do something at a time where the world needs it. I think this is exactly what the world needs right now. And another trend too is that this market, along with things like the Reddit rebellion, what's happening in this retail market is we're democratizing opportunity, where everyone in the world has access to opportunity, this American concept of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. More and more people are getting access to it. Bill Maher just did a piece where he was ranting about, crypto and what's happening. He thinks it's a joke and he thinks it's a scam. I wouldn't go to Bill Maher for financial advice, nor would I go to him for monetary policy or economic policy or anything about technology for that matter. He's a wonderful sort of comedian, news anchor that presents information in a very entertaining way. But in the same way, I wouldn't listen to Warren Buffett when it comes to things like this. Warren Buffett, I don't want to take away from the Sage of Omaha, the greatest value investor there's ever been, right? But if you've got a heart problem, you go to a cardiologist. If you've got a brain problem, you go to a neurologist. I wouldn't go to Warren Buffett for technology advice. I wouldn't go to him for advice around cryptocurrency. He's not qualified to really tell you. Make sure that you go to subject matter experts to get your information. Just because someone is famous or just because someone is successful in one field doesn't make them smart or successful in every field. And find the right subject matter experts in whatever you do, wherever you go. And so this is a very, very big deal, and it's amazing. And Bill Maher Warren Buffett talking about how bad it is that, the American public, the retail market is investing in the stock market. It's like gambling. Wait, we allow people to go into casinos where we ply them with alcohol and encourage them to gamble away their money on games where the odds are forever not in their favor. But we're complaining about the retail public participating in the stock market. The idea that they should be excluded from economic prosperity and opportunity. I think this is a wonderful thing, and I'm really happy to see it. And yes, some people are going to lose their money, but that's the price of tuition, right? We've all gone through the lessons of learning, and I think it's a great thing that everyone has a chance to participate. I think that this is a wonderful, wonderful thing, and when we look back on it, it's an incredible equalizing event, certainly at a time where there's massive economic disparity in this country. I'm very blessed. Clearly, I've done well financially, but I care about how the bottom half is doing, and I'm really proud to see this. And the traditional financial players are, a lot of hedge funds are shutting down right now because they just don't know how to, the rigged game that they've been playing. The game is changing, and in a large part because of this retail sort of market that's emerged. I think it's an amazing thing. Change is a constant thing. And the question isn't, can we stop change? Change is always going to happen. The question is, how do we adapt to it? And, and how do we nurture it, right? How do we help these young new investors and provide them with information and knowledge so that they can eventually, some of them in this pursuit of happiness, end up with their own family offices. It's an amazing thing to see people, and this is, the American dream. That's what this country is founded upon. This idea that you can come from nothing and have something, at a time where the American dream is, feels like it's under threat as small businesses are dying in ways we've never seen before. There's this balance, right? This other thing that's happening simultaneously. Oh my God, people are using their stimulus checks to become investors. What a great thing. It's certainly better than buying a Louis Vuitton bag.
I completely agree with what you're saying. And by the way, I've seen it in 2000 when I went just before the dot-com bubble exploded, and I saw some companies that I was like, but why do I need that? And basically everything with .com just got funded. Doesn't matter what you do. And then it got mature. And looking now, obviously, at the more mature world we see, and also the investors are more sophisticated. It's not just the masses and a cult-like following; it's serious investors. But now you're looking at the prices, right? I mean, you've seen just in the last week, the prices are crazy. I mean, Ethereum is at 3,400, and Bitcoin 60 soon. And on one hand, like you say, you have Nissim Taleb and co. telling you this is worthless. It's not worth even $1. And by the way, Bloomberg's head of commodities, it speaks in my events next week as well about the crypto, will tell you he just doesn't get it. He just doesn't understand where the world has evolved. And just because he says we pollute the planet to manufacture it, we also pollute the planet to manufacture cars, and we will not go back to horses. So on one hand, you have these guys who tell you this is worthless. And on the other side, you have some banks, I don't remember if it was Credit Suisse or Citi, that said, no, Bitcoin is going to reach 200K. Do you think
that was Citibank.
Prices make sense? Do you think the prices we see now make sense? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so that was Citibank. What I would say is incumbents, right? Incumbents in any industry always have a very hard time changing, when the status quo is changing, and they normally want to resist change to the best of their ability because they're on top. Why would they want change? And so this is not just with a thing with crypto. Also, as an incumbent, you have a very rigid and a very fixed view of your industry and the world because it's what you know, and it's deeply ingrained into your belief system. And when something emerges that challenges your belief system, it does not compute. It's very, very hard, to see the forest through the trees. And this is not new here. This is human nature. And so that's why you're seeing that. And you eventually, if you're part of that incumbent world, is you have to untether yourself. You have to disconnect from your current belief system to try and understand this new belief system. And what I would do is I'd take a step back because I question some of the old belief systems. Where does value come from? People talk about intrinsic value. I don't believe there is intrinsic value in anything. I believe there's utility in things, but value is not derived from anything but consensus in my mind. Meaning it takes two or more people to agree that something has value for it to have value. If you're the only person in the world that believes something has value, it has a sentimental value to you and you alone. And as more people agree that something has value, that market has more depth and liquidity. And then supply and demand ultimately determines pricing. And if you went to school right now, what I've just said may not be the consensus view of, call it academia. But I think what I'm saying makes a lot of sense. I think it might even ring more true. I mean, it does to me, obviously. This is my belief system, and this is how I view things. And so when you start to think about it from that perspective, value comes from shared belief. It comes from faith. Like on our bills, it says, "In God we trust." And for the first time in human history, when it comes to things like money and value, we were always told what has value, and then we just accepted that belief system, in the way that it was imposed upon us. This is the first time where we get to choose what we believe in, what we're going to give value to, what we're going to give power to. And right now, when you talk about sort of that cult following, there is a degree of truth in that. We ultimately, as the people, have the power to give value to things. And I think it's worth noting, every time you take out every time you go to a restaurant, every time you purchase something, you are giving power to something. And I encourage every single one of us to be conscious, to be aware of what we're empowering. Who are those owners? Are they moral and ethical? Are they doing things in a way where we want to support them? Because one of the most challenging things and the opportunity we have as a culture, as a civilization right now, is to be discerning in what we empower, what we give value to make sure that we're creating a world that we all want to live in, because the future is going to happen to us or it's going to happen with us. And I encourage us to be involved, mindfully choosing the things that we want to exist. We have that power, and it's something that I don't think we've ever realized. We get to choose what exists around us if we are conscious and mindful in the decisions we make, in the things that we give power to. Do we buy products that are creating more plastic in the world? Or do we buy water bottles that are made out of biodegradable things? When we eat meat, where did that meat come from? Was it a cheap meat factory that's torturing animals? Or are we buying, grass-fed, free-range chicken eggs or whatever it is? Ask the questions, right? Learn to know, to be aware of the things that you're doing. And through that awareness, we can make better decisions that are ultimately going to impact the future, not just the future world for ourselves, but it's going to determine what kind of future the world will be for the generations that follow us. And so when you really step back into the philosophical, that's what's happening here, is we are collectively waking up and deciding what we are ascribing value to, what we believe in, what we have faith in, the things that we want to give power to and support. And that is an incredibly powerful concept.
And I've seen some trends that come with the blockchain world and crypto that is a little bit weird for me as an outsider. Dogecoin. I mean, why would people put money in something that even its founder said it's a joke? I don't get it.
Well, why are all these people investing in GameStop? Well, at least in the GameStop thing, there was the company.
There's a purpose.
More than 100% of the stock was shorted, and at least there was a theory of a short squeeze that would create value at the expense of the hedge funds that had over shorted this stock beyond all of the stock in existence. So there was at its core an investment thesis or strategy that was aggressive but sound, right, in its own kind of way. In the case of Dogecoin, which, was created kind of as a half joke, what we're seeing, though, is the power of community. There are a lot of stocks that didn't have the same fundamental investment thesis as GameStop, but where, the mob rules, community are all getting behind something because they're entertained by it. And they think it's cute. And that's that is the wonderful thing. It's our money. We get to do what we want with it. And if you want to support, Dogecoin, even though it's a half joke, I mean, that's, I would be careful investing too much money. But if, you go buy $100 worth to go see what's going on and, Doge or dog backwards is God. And, maybe this is just some cosmic joke. Maybe at the end of the day, we're going to have one currency in the world, and it's going to be the dog coin. And Elon Musk is going to be the dog father of it all. I mean, I don't know what to make of it. I'm as confused as many of you are. But I've got a front row seat. I'm thoroughly entertained. And it's fascinating to watch, right? It's back to like, there's hedge funds shutting down right now because they're like, we just don't understand what's going on in the world right now. What we did in the past is no longer working, and what has served us, culturally in the past is no longer serving us, right? We have to figure out new things. And I as an entrepreneur, we create and we iterate, we experiment. And so, this experiment may not succeed, it may fail, it may crash and burn, but we're going to all learn something from it anyway. But yeah, it's crazy. 50+ billion of value. Dogecoin is worth more than Ford Motor Company. If you had asked me a year ago if that was possible, I would have said no. And so even I guess I am limited. I am in a box of sorts. There's thinner lines, but we're living through crazy times, and I recommend we all keep an open mind.
And I know we had you for an hour, and I have so many questions I didn't even touch it. Your philanthropy and many other things you do, and hopefully I can have you at our future conferences and do another maybe session like that. But there's one question from one family member here that I know actually very well, and she's asking, curious to hear how Puerto Rico living has been. I'm considering spending some time there myself. She's considering to perhaps move there and check it out. So she wants to hear how has it been for you.
In the same way I said, go buy $100 of the Bitcoin, buy a flight, come down and check it out. For me, Puerto Rico is my favorite place in the world. For me, it checks the boxes I care most about. Quality of life, I mean, it's paradise. It's the most underappreciated part of the United States. Opportunity, tremendous. Opportunity everywhere. But also, the potential for impact. You can really change the lives and make life better for others through this process. And for me, that's like the trifecta. That's my perfect trinity, which is impact, quality of life, and opportunity. And when you get all those things, which you don't usually get, I would strongly encourage you to come check it out. Obviously, the 0% capital gains, both short and long term, and 4% ordinary income taxes, as taxes are rising rapidly, as 1031 exchanges might be going away. It's definitely a time where I would check it out sooner rather than later. There's so many people moving there, they may change the rules. And for those of us that have our government contract, our decree, we would be grandfathered in, but they may close the door on new entrants. So I would encourage you to come check it out sooner rather than later, and hit me up. I'm happy to send you in the right direction and share some of my views. But I love it. I'd be there 300 days a year if I didn't have to be so many places because of the things that I'm attempting to do in the world.
So people right here, so thankful for this hour of great insight and experience. Roberto Clemente Jr., a good friend, says hi. There's another person is asking that they heard that there are infrastructure issues with internet in Puerto Rico. Is that so?
Well, it's an island, and it's a territory, and so it's behind. Its infrastructure needs to be upgraded. Right? We need to upgrade the energy infrastructure. It should be running off of solar power, not fossil fuels. We have 340 days of sunlight. It makes Southern California look gloomy and cold. And so it's like perfect weather all year, other than if a hurricane hits. The telecom infrastructure, needs to be upgraded. The FCC has offered $900 million in grants into people that upgrade telecommunications. And so it's all happening. And my view is, if there's something that isn't there that you want, build it. If there's a certain style of restaurant that, you love in New York, but you don't find it in Puerto Rico, if you're blessed enough that you have money, build the restaurant, hire the chef, create the world in which you want to live. We have the ability to do these things. Yes, it requires some work, but I'd love to see Puerto Rico leading the world. I'd like to see, in the United States, I'd like to see Puerto Rico have better infrastructure than the mainland, as a place where we can test new things. It's 100 miles wide, 30 miles tall. we can roll out upgraded infrastructure. We don't have the land mass that you have in the continental United States. And so, everything is possible. Let's be part of the solution. We've got a lot of problems, a lot of challenges in this 21st century. And the good news is we do have 21st century solutions. Innovation is the answer. That's the only way we're going to get out of the mess we're in.
We have another regards here from South Africa. We have people from all around the world here today. Maybe my last question for you is, how come there's so much money in blockchain and cryptocurrency, and yet it hasn't solved the basic infrastructure, the platform to be user-friendly, right? I mean, I saw lately you make a mistake and you move money from an Ether-based platform to a Bitcoin one, you may lose the money. If I go to Coinbase and I want to call them, you don't have a customer answering, customer relation people to take the call. A Trezor and everything is not user-friendly. You really need to understand what you're doing. And if it was, I'm sure so many people would have gotten into this game. Why isn't that part solved? It's the interface that we're talking about. You guys solved things that are way more complicated. Why is the interface still such a struggle?
Well, it's the type of people that attract it. It's cryptographers, deep computer scientists. It's not your user interface, marketing, experiential sort of people, just the nature of how industries develop. But that's changing. I think in the next year, you're going to see, by the end of next year, it's going to be pretty friendly. And I estimate about 10% of the population of the United States now has bought crypto in some form or fashion. And so things are not they need to be, but there's plenty of talented people working on it. And, let's get involved. Back to what I said, let's make the things that we want. We can build it.
We have millions of responses here. I will not go through them because we really have to fill it, but maybe one last question. Somebody's asking, what are your thoughts about XRP in the short and long term, especially with institutional inflows and use case, and the other established and emerging cross-border oriented digital currencies in general?
So conceptually, right, those, being called a new SWIFT, that payment system, cross-border and all that sort of back end, the concept is sound. The real question is how much traction is there? How much real use around that use case is occurring? And I haven't taken a look recently, but I think it's more of an idea than it is real in its implementation. And the thing as someone studying it is I'd want to know that. I know that the concept is there, right? The idea is big. The question is I'd be looking at the traction and how much traction is there really, because I haven't personally seen it. At Blockchain Capital Fund 2, our largest investment was in Ripple Labs. I know the founders and the key executives. It's not been my area of focus for the last year or two, so I'm a little out of touch. But that's the thing that I'd be double clicking on personally before I would be buying XRP right now.
And maybe I'll just shove quickly two questions into one. We have loads of questions and I apologize, we cannot get to them all, but another Puerto Rico questions that I can bundle here is the problem with the infrastructure you think is an investment opportunity. I think you said it is. And what's your view on Puerto Rico's statehood and the Jones Act? Both, are they likely to change and should they?
Yeah, so yes, there's investment opportunity in infrastructure. Obviously, infrastructure development is a high stakes game. It's not angel investing. So, but absolutely, I think there's tremendous infrastructure investment opportunities, massive incentives from the federal government, $5 billion a year coming in more. And so the capital is there, the opportunity is there, and you just need the determination and you have to have boots on the ground. You're not going to phone it in. In terms of statehood, we'll see what happens with Washington, D.C. If D.C. can get through the Senate, then I'd say Puerto Rico statehood is a possibility, though I think it's probably unlikely. And again, I'm indifferent. I support the will of the Puerto Rican people. I just think it's unlikely because the Democrats, and again, I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. I'm an American. I believe in unity. United we stand. And the Democrats, though, benefit greatly from DC becoming a state. It's 90% Democrats. Puerto Rico is not a solid blue state if it were a state. it's probably slightly more red than blue. And when the Democrats, I think, do their real assessment of who would benefit from that, the Republicans probably benefit a little bit more from it. So I don't think there will be political will for it. And I also don't think that America's in an expansionist phase. So we talk about it. I think there's interest in it, but the actual reality of that happening, I think, is going to be much more complicated because there's lower hanging fruit for the administration to pursue right now. But we'll see. And just to break down the demographics, according to the CIA, Italy is 87% Catholic, or the most Catholic place in the world. The Philippines is 86% Catholic. Puerto Rico is third place at 85% Catholic. And so it's actually pretty conservative and extremely Catholic. And so it looks a lot more like Florida in terms of its politics. And when you spend time with Puerto Ricans in New York, you may get a view of AOC, a very sort of liberal, progressive view of Puerto Ricans. But in Puerto Rico, that's not quite the case.
Rocco, I want to thank you and tell you that you're one of the most colorful, energetic, positive, smart, great people I've had the honor and pleasure of interviewing here. I hope to see you at our conferences in person. We will definitely invite you to what we do in Miami, in Texas, in Canada, in the UAE, in Israel, all around the place. It would be great to see you there. I'd like to remind everybody that next week we're doing our in-person conference at the World Trade Center's rooftop with Larry Silverstein and other amazing speakers from all around the world, major families. We'll talk crypto as well, as I said, with the head of commodities at Bloomberg. And anything else you'd like to add at this stage?
Thank you so much for having me back. I'm more than happy to come in again, and we can skip over the past and just talk about the present and the future next time. I have obviously a lot of perspective on that, and I look forward to attending one of your in-person events. As human beings, we like human connection, and we've been locked up for too long, and I'm personally very excited by the prospects of being in a room together with other like-minded human beings. Excited.
Thank you so much. I appreciate making it happen. I know you had a very tight schedule today. So thank you so much again for being with us, and we'll definitely be in touch with you regarding our upcoming in-person sessions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Stay safe.